So every once in a while, Cedar Fair, now Six Flags since the merger, likes to put out these ride surveys to their season pass holders, where basically they'll present a few concepts for rides that they might be looking to bring to the parks, and it's just a survey to kind of, gauge what people think about different ride concepts. And they've been doing this for the last couple of years, and lots of parks do this, but what makes these particularly exciting for the Cedar Fair and Six Flags parks is that they've been doing this for a couple years, and they have a proven track record of a lot of this stuff actually coming to fruition. So this isn't another one of those just random surveys. When we see surveys like this in this style from Six Flags or Cedar Fair parks, which are now just Six Flags parks, it means there is a very good chance that one of the attractions presented in this survey could be the next major attraction to arrive at whatever the respective park is. And they usually go out in batches. So this week we had surveys sent out to tons of Legacy Six Flags and Legacy Cedar Fair parks across the chain. Tons of surveys went out, giving us some pretty interesting insights into what a lot of these parks may be looking at for some of their next editions. And I wanted to talk about Six Flags Great America today because I just moved to the Milwaukee area. It's my new home park, and it arguably has one of the more exciting surveys that went out this week. I don't remember what day they went out this week. I'm gonna be honest, it's been a really busy week. I said it was a busy week at work when I recorded my Dollywood video, but this has been one of the wildest work weeks I've had yet. That's just the professional world. Sometimes project deadlines all just kind of line up on the same week by coincidence, and we'll just say the last few days this week I pretty much worked until I went to bed. But tonight I got to a place where I don't have to work all the way until bed, so I can finally talk about this. Although it may have just come out yesterday. I don't know. Like I said, this whole week's been a blur for me. But I'm excited now because I get to talk about something I enjoy. Not that I don't enjoy engineering, but I've been doing plenty of that this week. I want to talk about roller coasters. So again, I'll be specifically talking about Six Flags Great America survey in this video. If you look online, you can find the surveys from tons of other parks across the new Six Flags chain. And I may do other videos later talking about some of those other surveys because I just think this stuff is very interesting when we get this kind of sneak peek into what might be coming to these parks in the future. And again, it is not a guarantee that we are getting anything off of this list of attractions. There have been some of these surveys that have gone out and the parks don't get anything that was on that survey. However, there is I'd say more often than not, it seems like when these surveys go out, one of the attractions in the surveys does get taken to completion at the park. I mean, several of the attractions that we're seeing next year, some of them have been delayed to 2027, but most of the attractions we're seeing across the chain for next week in 2027 did appear on these surveys like last year or the year before. A lot of new for 2025 attractions this year, like Alpine Fury, Rapterra, those are the two I know for sure, but those appeared on these kinds of surveys as well. So a very good chance that Great America's next major attraction in like 2028 or whenever that ends up being will be one of these three options. Now, different parks got different numbers of options. Some parks got like 5 or 6 options on the survey. Some got only 1. Great America got 3 options here. I'll just go ahead and list them out here. The options were a family thrill launch coaster, which appears to be like a Vekoma family multi-launch like Big Bear Mountain, which we'll talk about that in a second. A flying theater, which is an interesting one. And then of course the one that everyone's going to be talking about is the Giga Coaster, the Great America Giga Coaster. It's not real, it still might never get built, but it's a thing they're actually thinking about, which is really exciting. Now, I do want to note that when you see these surveys go out, again, they kind of all go out at the same time to all the different parks. And again, I just find it so interesting, all the different kinds of insights you can pull out of this kind of survey across the different parks. But anyways, what you'll see when you look across these surveys is that some attractions appear on multiple surveys for multiple parks, and some attractions only appear on like one survey for one park. And what that tells me is if it's something that appears on multiple parks surveys, that's just a concept that the chain thinks is a good idea and they want to see what park they might want to implement that idea at. But if it's something that only appears at that specific park, then it's something that the chain's thinking about for that specific park. And so for this survey, the family thrill launch coaster is something that appears on several surveys from several other parks. So that's just a general concept that the chain thinks is a good idea, and they're looking at which parks they might want to implement it at. And Great America is a park they might want to implement it at. However, the Giga Coaster and the Flying Theater are both unique to Great America on this survey, which is pretty cool. I'll just say right now, I think that I would be fine with any 3 of these options coming to the park. Obviously, I'm gonna go with most of the coaster enthusiasts in saying I would most want to see a Giga Coaster, but I'd be perfectly happy with a flying theater or a family multi-launch as well. But I'm gonna go through each of these concepts one by one, talk about my thoughts on them, kind of what the park might be thinking, wanting to implement attractions like this, where it might go, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think Great America has an incredibly solid collection here of possible future attractions that they're looking at. Compared to some of the other surveys, a lot of them had some, we'll just say some weird options in there. So I feel like we were lucky to get an incredibly solid set of options here, at least in my opinion. So Great America is one of the largest and highest attended and therefore most profitable parks in even the new combined Six Flags chain. So of course we're gonna get some really nice treatment when it comes to new capital investment and that kind of thing. It does always make me feel kind of bad for the people that have smaller parks as their local parks that are not always getting new exciting attractions like this, but you know, we are here at Great America and I'm fine with it. We'll just go ahead and start with option number 1, the one that I know most people are going to be talking about and that is probably the most interesting to talk about because what a can of worms this is. Of course I'm talking about the Giga Coaster. So on the survey they present 2 paragraphs of what feels like probably originally AI generated and then edited by a person a little bit, paragraphs about, you know, state-of-the-art engineering and jaw-dropping speeds. I particularly like that it says in here that it's for adrenaline seekers and coaster enthusiasts alike. Yeah, little known fact about coaster enthusiasts, we're actually not adrenaline seekers, so it's good they made that distinction. I know I get some people on this channel that are not die-hard coaster nerds, so if you're unfamiliar, a Giga Coaster is defined as a coaster that is over 300 feet tall. I mean, that's basically it. It's just a marketing term. There are not very many of these, like, at all. And actually Cedar Fair owns most of them, or did own most of them pre-merger. These rides typically start with a 300-foot tall lift hill that leads you into an incredible 300-plus foot drop, which is just insane. These things are crazy to look at the Midway. I used to live in East Tennessee, about 4 hours away from Carowinds, and I go a couple times a year, and they have Fury 325 there, which is currently the tallest chain-lifted Giga Coaster. You can argue whether the launched one in Spain counts as a Giga or not, Red Force, but we're not getting into the nitty-gritty today. But anyways, those things just have such a presence on the Midway, if nothing else, which is awesome. And of course, they're really, really fast because you just took a 300-foot drop. You're probably in the 90-mile-an-hour range now. And most of the Giga Coasters that have been built, the very few that have been built, usually tend to focus more on speed, just letting you feel that speed. And yeah, I think these rides get a lot of notoriety in the coaster world just because they are so large and there's not very many of them out there. It is a very big undertaking to build a ride like this. Like I said, most of the ones that are out there were just from Cedar Fair because they're pretty much the only company that had the capital and was willing to spend the capital on attractions like this, and they put a couple Giga Coasters onto their like largest parks, you know, Cedar Point, Kings Island, Canada's Wonderland, Carowinds, you know, the top performers. And I think it's pretty easy to say that they've done wonders for all the parks they've been installed at and becoming just usually the most iconic attraction at their respective park, immediately being huge draws for, you know, the general public even years after they've opened. Fury is still easily the most popular attraction at Carowinds. Millennium Force still gets crazy lines. So yeah, I do think these are really solid investments for parks that are large enough to justify the investment, which Great America definitely is, which has been actually a topic of conversation lately. After the Six Flags Cedar Fair merger, people have been talking about, you know, now that Cedar Fair is kind of in charge of the old Six Flags parks, might we see them do the same thing they did with Cedar Fair parks? And might we see Giga Coasters start to go to these larger Six Flags parks that would fit the typical description of a Cedar Fair park that would get a Giga Coaster? So we're talking Great Adventure, Magic Mountain, and of course, Great America here. And for some reason this year specifically, there's been a lot of discourse about Great America maybe getting a Giga Coaster, and it's been kind of heated online for some reason. There's a lot of people out there that are skeptics, understandably so, but they were very outspoken, I guess is the right word. People were getting really mad about how like, oh, there's a height restriction and you can't build too close to the interstate and blah 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 blah. It's too much noise. People, it's gonna be noise complaints from the neighbors. Just lots of people that were just definitively saying that it was impossible because of X, Y, Z. And yes, it's important to be skeptical. Yes, it's important to look at the reality of those kinds of things, but a Giga Coaster would not be appearing in this survey if Six Flags didn't think that they could get waivers for the height restrictions, and if they thought that it really wasn't possible to appease the neighbors when it comes to noise complaints and stuff. If they really thought it wasn't possible, it wouldn't go in this survey. And no offense to random people online, but I think Six Flags knows more about what they can get away with at their parks than you do. So, see, that's the thing. For the last couple months, people have there's been a lot of back and forth discourse about Great America's looking at getting a Giga, was the rumor. And other people are saying, no, that's impossible. And these people are clashing, but now it's appeared in this official survey. So that it's like Six Flags themselves just wants to pour some gasoline on the fire there of this whole discussion. And I looked at all of the park surveys for all the different Six Flags parks, and I think that this is like the largest ride, probably the largest investment that appears on any of the surveys for any of the parks. So that makes me feel good that Great America is positioned to continue receiving great capital investment from the chain going forward, which is great to hear for Great America locals like myself. But regardless, I think the big question for this attraction since the rumors started, and especially now that it's appeared in the survey showing that they're actually thinking about it, is where the heck is this thing gonna go? Great America is not exactly a small park, but it's like pretty much 100% developed. It's like Cedar Point levels of coaster on top of coaster on top of coaster. I think people were really surprised they were able to squeeze Wrath of Rakshasa, the about 160 foot tall dive coaster, in this year. So if they barely had room to fit in that attraction, where are they going to put an attraction that is 300 feet tall and probably about twice as long in terms of track length? Like, I mean, if we just look at like a satellite image of Great America from the perspective of like the park entrance looking up, they could run a Giga Coaster kind of through some of the backstage areas to the left there. But the problem is that there are neighborhoods like right up against that side of the park. And I know the park already receives noise complaints from the neighborhoods over there, which I have heard is why there's almost no roller coasters in that section of the park that backs up to those neighborhoods. If you notice, that's where like the water rides and the picnic pavilions and stuff are. There's really no rides in that corner. And then I've heard the reason is because they don't want to put rides that close to that neighborhood that they already get noise complaints from. So it seems like they probably would not put a Giga Coaster over there, even though they probably could fit it kind of where those backstage buildings are if they relocate them, and then where that employee parking lot is. That's probably not where it would go though. Other than that, on the right side, there's that stretch of land in between the water park and the interstate, but I believe that the current position of the water park is as close as they are allowed to build to the interstate. There's usually pretty wide clearance requirements for how much space has to be left between any kind of development and the interstate. I'm thinking that surely there's got to be some kind of way to get like a waiver for that or something. I mean, generally, yes, you're not allowed to build close to an interstate, but also there's tons of places around here where lots of buildings come up very close to interstate highways. So maybe there's some kind of path Six Flags can go down to get some kind of exception or something to be able to build in that stretch of land right there. But then that still leaves the question of like, you still got to put the station in the queue line somewhere. I don't know where you'd put the station and queue line, but it could meet up with that particular plot of land. I feel like the most likely option for the Giga Coaster is that it just goes over the parking lot. That's always an easy solution because, I mean, the parking lot's basically free land. And if it's a Giga Coaster, then it doesn't really matter if you put grass under it or anything like that, because it's going to be high enough off the ground most of the time that, you can just build it on top of the parking lot for the most part. Still leaves the where's the station gonna go question, which I think probably brings me to the biggest negative with this potential option is I think if we do get the Giga Coaster, it's going to come with a ride removal of some kind, probably a major coaster removal. The theory a lot of people have that I kind of agree with is that they would probably remove Superman and then they put the station in Lift Hill and Queue Line and everything kind of where Superman is, and then have the ride run kind of over the parking lot. That's probably what they would do. But either way, I really don't see a way that they could fit a Giga Coaster into this park without removing anything. So that's just a proceed with caution there. If we are going to be rooting for the Giga, we're probably going to lose something major in the process in order to fit this in. A lot of people will probably say that's worth the trade-off, but it's just something to think about. Anyways, I'm gonna try to move on in just a second because there's just so much to talk about with this whole Giga Coaster situation. Maybe I'll do a whole separate video just talking about the Great America Giga Coaster possibility, because it is just a huge can of worms and there's just so much to talk about with, you know, how this would even work. But regardless, I think a lot of people are rooting for this because one of the biggest complaints I hear with Great America is that it doesn't have a standout roller coaster. It has a lot of truly fantastic roller coasters, but there's nothing that sticks out as like a world's best contender. There's no like Fury 325 or Steel Vengeance or Iron Gwazi. Like, it doesn't have that caliber of ride where people feel like they have to travel just to ride that one particular ride. I've personally argued that that doesn't really matter that much to me because I feel like Great America's coaster collection is so solid with such a wide variety of so many different types of attractions represented. I think it has one of the best varieties of a coaster lineup of any park in the United States. And pretty much every coaster there, I would say, is at least good, if not great, in its respective category. Personally, I've always said I would rather have a park with a huge variety of great rides than like one or two standouts and then a bunch of mediocre stuff. So that's kind of where I sit with Great America, but I do understand why a lot of people feel like that we should get a true standout attraction. And a Giga Coaster would certainly be the standout attraction for Great America. It would give them something to market. If done right, it would be something that people would travel across the country specifically to ride, which is not something we really have at the park now. And yeah, as much as I don't have a problem with the fact that we don't have a standout roller coaster right now, I'd still like to see this Giga Coaster. And of these three options, this is probably the one I would most like to see, but I'd be fine with these other two. So let's talk about them real quick. Second option is the Flying Feeder. This is an interesting one because much like the Giga Coaster, it did not appear on any other surveys for any other parks, which most likely means this is something that the chain is specifically considering for Great America specifically, which just kind of raises the question of why? And I think the reason is I think this is going in an existing building in the park. Cedar Fair is in charge now, and Cedar Fair does not seem to like to build new buildings unless it's like a station for a roller coaster. And some of the other dark ride concepts that appeared on other surveys like specifically said that they would be replacing current indoor attractions. So I think this is definitely a situation where there's some indoor space somewhere in the park that they would like to utilize differently. And they started looking at it, they're like, what can we do with this space? And at some point somebody suggested, well, we could do a flying feeder in this space. And then that's how this ended up on the survey. That's my guess. As to what that space is, my theory is probably the queue building for Dark Knight Coaster. Dark Knight Coasters are indoor Wild Mouse, which has its own building, but the queue line is routed through an old theater back in like the Marriott days and even some portion of the Six Flags days. Current indoor queue line for Dark Knight Coaster used to be a theater, and actually most of the theater is still back there. The Dark Knight queue line only takes up about half of that building. And from what I understand, the second half of that building behind Dark Knight's queue line is still completely untouched, like exactly the same theater that it was when it closed like 20 years ago. So then I read online from multiple people that claim to have inside sources at the park, which you always have to take that with a grain of salt, but these people do have a decent track record that I'm talking about. Some of them said that apparently when the Cedar Fair execs were doing their walkthroughs of the Six Flags parks after the merger, they were particularly interested in a lot of the theater spaces at Great America, and they were particularly apparently very interested in utilizing that extra space behind Dark Knight's queue that's just empty right now. They were really interested in doing something with that space. So a lot of people assumed that that would be rerouting Dark Knight's queue and then using that theater as an actual theater again. But my theory, I could be totally wrong, but my theory is that somebody either at Great America or Six Flags Corporate thought, Flying feeders are pretty popular in a lot of other places. What if we put a flying feeder into that space? So that's where I think they're looking at doing this, because like I said, I think this is going to have to be in a pre-existing building in the park. I don't think they're building a new building for this. If we look at some of the other buildings that might house something like this, like there's the park's like main theater in Hometown Square, but I don't see them turning that into a flying theater, because as of now they still do use that pretty regularly for shows in the park. It's really their only indoor show venue left, so I don't see them getting rid of that. And then there's like Justice League's building, but personally I think Justice League could be a really awesome dark ride if they just maintained it properly, so I'd much rather see them do a refurb and overhaul on Justice League. And even besides my personal opinion there, that building I don't think would lend itself very well to a flying theater. It was very clearly built for a dark ride. I don't think it would make sense to put a theater in there. So I do think that this would be going in the, whatever the theater was in Orland's Place behind Dark Knight's queue. Now, whether they would just build this flying theater behind Dark Knight's queue and then route the queue in behind it, or if they would move Dark Knight's queue outdoors and completely gut and redo that whole building, I don't know. But I think this is going in that building if this is what gets selected here. Regardless, I think flying theaters are awesome. For those of you who don't know what a flying theater is, it's you sit in theater seats and then they kind of get picked up into like this dome screen. And then they kind of do a little bit of motion simulation, but you just have like a light seatbelt and stuff, so it can't do anything too crazy. But because it's so open and your feet are dangling and everything, I find it gives some pretty cool sensations. So if you've done Soarin' at any of the Disney parks, that was one of the original flying theaters. So that's the kind of attraction we're talking about. It's an interesting fit for a Six Flags park, but I really like to see them leaning more into these different kind of immersive theming type experiences. I'm a huge sucker for theming, and I'm a huge sucker for dark rides and other types of rides that are not just roller coasters as much as I am a roller coaster guy. So I'm really happy to see Six Flags kind of leaning into this kind of stuff that they definitely wouldn't have really looked at before. And that's why I just think it would be really cool to have a flying theater here at Great America. We already have a pretty cool collection of indoor attractions. We have previously mentioned Dark Knight Coaster, Indoor Wild Mouse, then we have Justice League, Indoor Dark Ride, and then Chubasco, our teacup ride, is mostly enclosed and it's able to stay open during most thunderstorms. Getting a fourth indoor ride, I think that'd be pretty cool. That puts us in a pretty cool position compared to most of the other Six Flags parks that have like almost none. So anyways, this doesn't really explain what the ride would be like themed to. Like, what would you be soaring over? I don't know. It's literally just the concept of a flying theater. Like, how would you feel about a flying theater? And I know for some reason a lot of not just coaster enthusiasts, but also just theme park people in general just don't really like flying theaters. I love them. I've only done Soarin' at Disney, but that was like, geez, that was like 2017, the last time I did Soarin', I think. Anyways, recently I did the standalone one at the island at Pigeon Forge. I forget the name of it, but that one was also fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to have a flying theater here. If the Giga Coaster wasn't on the survey and we had something else in there instead, this would probably be my top pick, just because I think it's really unique for a Six Flags park, and it's just really cool, and I'd love to see them do more attractions like this. A Giga Coaster is a Giga Coaster, okay? Of course I'm gonna go for the Giga, but this would still be really cool to see. Then the third and final option on the survey is a family thrill launch coaster. The image shown there is Lightning at a park I can't pronounce somewhere in Sweden, which is a Vekoma family launch coaster, same model as Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood. I know longer time viewers of this channel will be very familiar with Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood, because I lived near Dollywood when Big Bear Mountain was being constructed. So yeah, it would be kind of hilarious if I watched the construction of Big Bear Mountain and then I moved, and then my new home park also gets a Vekoma family multi-launch, and I get to watch the construction of that too. It would be kind of funny. Regardless, I also think it is important to point out this is specified as a family thrill launch coaster, and some of the other Six Flags surveys sent out contained like a family launch coaster that was different than this, and some of the surveys even had this, the family thrill launch coaster, and then just a family launch coaster. So clearly this is looking to be kind of riding that line between family coaster and thrill ride, which I think will be great for Great America. So think less like Mine Train thrill level and more like Hagrid's thrill level, I think, is probably what they're probably going to be going for here. I do like that they specify themed storytelling, immersive elements. So, if you're gonna do a family coaster like this, I think give it a really cool theme, give it a really cool story, decorate it up, add some fun special effects, maybe even onboard audio. I don't know. I mean, we saw it, I think Flash and Siren's Curse both had onboard audio this year at Six Flags Parks. So it's possible we could see onboard audio on this family thrill launch coaster if we were to get it. Again, this is the only option on Great America surveys that appeared at multiple other Six Flags properties. So this is something they're kind of looking at across the chain to install at maybe even multiple parks. And yeah, just the concept of a family thrill launch coaster, like there have been a lot of these popping up lately, and for good reason. They're really fun rides, even for coaster enthusiasts like myself. I love Big Bear Mountain. It's probably like my third favorite coaster at Dollywood, to be honest. They're just really fun rides, and they're very accessible for the family. Great America is a park that is very heavy on the thrill rides. For family coaster, you kind of just have Whizzer, which is fantastic, but having like a modern multi-launch family coaster I think would do a lot for this park. And I think I even mentioned that in a previous video, that I think a modern family multi-launch at Great America would be pretty awesome. So apparently they like my ideas. The main concern I see from people on this ride is the same as the main concern on the Giga Coaster, which is they would probably have to remove something to fit this in, just because of how developed Great America is. Just because it's a much smaller ride in terms of footprint, I think it would be much easier for them to fit in this family multi-launch without removing anything than the Giga. I think if we get the Giga, it's almost a near guarantee something gets removed. Family multi-launch, I think they could find a place to squeeze it in without removing a major attraction. But also keep in mind, if you've been to Dollywood, if you've seen Big Bear Mountain, you know that really stretches out, takes up a lot of land. So these family coasters can be very large. So just keep that in mind. There's been a bit of a rumor going around since the survey went up that this might be taking the place of Whizzer. Of course, I really hope that's not the case. I love Whizzer, and now that whatever the one in Columbia is closed, the Whizzer is now the last remaining of that ride model in the entire world. So it must be protected at all costs. And the main reason I think a family multi-launch would be cool at Great America is because we need more family coasters. So just replacing a family coaster with another family coaster would be kind of counterintuitive to that point. So I really hope they find somewhere else to put this. Personally, I think this would be cool in Yukon Territory. I say that because Yukon Territory is probably my favorite area of the park thematically, but there's like almost nothing in there, and it feels like so much wasted potential. Current rumor is that the new kids area that we're getting soon, which is already confirmed, probably not happening next year at this point, but 2027. Regardless, whenever that happens, the new kids area is most likely going where the go-karts are, right next to Yukon Territory. There's already a small kids area at Camp Cartoon that's kind of Yukon Territory adjacent, but it kind of sucks. So once we get the new kids area opened, like right next to it basically, they can move some of the attractions from there over to the new kids area. And I think that opens up a little bit of room back there where you have the previous space from Camp Cartoon. And then I think from there you can kind of go back into some of the backstage area if you're willing to relocate some other things. And I think you can work with that space from where Camp Cartoon is back and build a pretty nice family multi-launch through there. And then you can, they talk about themed storytelling and immersive elements. You could do a really cool Yukon Territory, logging camp style theme. I don't know exactly what they would go with. I just really want to have a really cool attraction in Yukon Territory because I think it's a cool area in concept that's just not really utilized at all right now. So that's personally, selfishly, what I would want. I don't really know how a lot of this works behind the scenes, but again, it is very interesting, some of the insights you can pull out of not just these individual park surveys, but just looking at the different surveys of the different parks, which rides are repeated across multiple surveys, which parks have which options on their surveys. It really tells you a lot about the chain's attitude towards certain parks. And based on this, a pretty solid collection, 3 rides, completely different rides in completely different categories, all pretty solid. We don't have anything kind of stupid like some of the other surveys had stuff that's just like, what? Why? All of these are solid options for Great America, so hopefully that means we're in a good place going forward. Of course, I feel like everybody online is just going to be begging for the Giga Coaster, but I'd be cool with either of these other attractions. I have heard 1 or 2 people say that the family multi-launch is probably the best fit for Great America, and I get where they're coming from. I still think the Giga Coaster would be the best fit because Great America has established itself as such a coaster-dominated park, and just having a Giga Coaster that is just a massive ride in the way that nothing else at Great America is really massive, I think would really kind of it's like the final screw in there they need to really stand out as a like top coaster park. And for that reason, I feel like the Giga Coaster is the best fit. And once they get that, I don't think they need to put in another high throw coaster for a long time. We can kind of focus on some of this other stuff once that goes in. But as for my personal opinion, again, I'd still really be happy with any of these options, really. I know I ran through these pretty fast. Again, I've been pretty busy this week, and I just happened to have a little time tonight, so I thought I'd throw this together. I don't know when I'm going to be able to edit this and actually get it up, but regardless, whenever you see it, let me know down in the comments below which option would you like to see at Great America. I know everybody's going to say the Giga, at least most people are going to say the Giga, but if you have a unique take, I'd love to hear that as well. What do you think about these options? What do you think about what it says about where Great America is as a park in the chain? Honestly, it might be worth doing a follow-up video on any one of these three options, particularly the Giga Coaster, and just talk about, yeah, that it's just, for me, it's the fact that the Giga Coaster had been talked about like for quite a bit, and there had already been quite a bit of discourse before this survey came out about a Great America Giga Coaster, and there's just, I feel like there's so much lore with the Giga Coaster option in particular. People have been talking about this basically since the merger. People have been fighting about this basically since the merger. Now it's out here on the survey, but like, where on earth is there space at Great America to put in the Giga Coaster? It's like one of the most developed parks in the chain. It's just, there's so much to talk about here. So maybe I'll do another video later just about the Giga Coaster. But again, for now, love to hear your thoughts about what you think about any of these attractions at Great America. Yeah, anyways, hope to catch another ride with you again very soon.